Boom. Welcome to the Hustle Culture Podcast, where we profile entrepreneurs as they hustle their way to the top. Today's guest is Ivan Raiklin, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Carlos Gil. Los.
Yo, what's going on? To all you hustlers out there, so good to be back here with all of you. We've got an awesome guest that's going to be joining us here in Mr. Ivan Raiklin. But first, I want to say thank you to everyone that has downloaded the podcast on iTunes. Thank you so much for all your support. Thank you for the reviews. You guys out there are amazing. Keep them coming. We're also on Twitter at Bring the Hustle, as well as on Facebook. So thank you. And Ivan, who we're about to bring on as our guest on this episode, I feel like I've been living with him for the last 2 weeks. He's been out here in the Bay Area for the last couple of weeks. We've been hanging out. We were at a couple of events together. We went to the Blab meetup this past Saturday. So with no further ado, welcome to the Hustle Culture Podcast, Ivan.
Boom, Carlos, Tayo. Awesome. It's good to see you guys again. It's been a minute for Tayo and I. We haven't seen each other face-to-face since the, PodCon conference, Mid-Atlantic Podcast Conference. And Carlos, what has it been, like 48 hours maybe since the last time I saw you? About 1 a.m. in the morning on Saturday night. Or no, it wasn't that late that night, but the previous week it was.
There was a lot of late nights. Anytime you hang out with Ivan, make sure that you're fully caffeinated because it's going to be a late night. That, or he might ask you to record a podcast with him in the backseat of his car, which I think we should use that to kick off this episode. How Tayo and Ivan met each other, because I think it's just a remarkable story.
I think Tayo says it better than I do. You want to start, Tayo?
Hello?
Oh, maybe not.
Are we back? Good. I think we lost each other temporarily. But yes, look, Ivan, I mean, if you remember, if you guys listened to the podcast last week, you heard about me profiling Ivan about, just giving him the hustler shout out because he just convinced me to record my other podcast with him. And I was so intrigued and enamored by this guy and his energy. So I was like, we got to get more of him. And I got to introduce him to the world because I'm telling you, man, this guy is on his way to taking over the world. But instead of me just doing all talking, why don't you tell us your hustler's journey? Tell us how you got started. Tell us the beginning and the birth of Mr. Raiklin, and then we can go on. All right,
so once we get to the point where we're sitting in the back of my car, then you'll jump in. All right. So, all right, here we go. So my name is Ivan Raiklin, and I'm an angel investor, startup advisor, and sharing economy entrepreneur. So here's my story. Basically, I've been in the government space doing my military thing. And the ops tempo has been pretty high where I've been working a job within the military, 80 hours a week, deployed, doing training. So I've been fully engaged in that. But in my spare time, I was still trying to find out information about entrepreneurship, hustling, and also tech and the startup scene. So it wasn't until in this springtime that I was in a position where I was sitting in a cush 40-hour-a-week job, which allowed me 60 hours a week to literally dabble and play with everything else, where I started researching, learning about entrepreneurship, listening to podcasts, really getting deep diving into different podcasts. And now I subscribe to about over 100 of them and listen to them regularly. So I started to really deep dive, try and figure out who the people that I wanted to engage with within that space in order to be able to launch my own podcast. So as I was out, trying to figure out what topic I'd do it on, I started going to different pitch competitions, getting more in depth in knowing about the startup community on the East Coast, going to New York Tech Day, going to 1776 Global Pitch Competition here in DC, going to Chicago Tech Week, all these different events, and then also to Podcast Movement, which was in August of this year. So I go down there and I figured it out. I got enough information. I have enough knowledge. I went down there to really fill that knowledge void that I had in terms of starting my podcast. And then as I was about to launch my podcast, I started dabbling with Periscope and Meerkat and Brian Fanzo, who both of you guys know. I'm sure. I know Carlos does. You know who he is, right, Tayo?
Yeah.
Brian Fanzo. I jump on his Periscope or Meerkat, and I look in the background, and he's talking on something that there's 4 screens in the background. I ask him real quick in the chat. I'm like, Brian, what the hell is that? And he says, oh, that's a new live streaming platform called Blab. And I was like, all right, click, see ya. I'm never going back. So I immediately went on Blab, started hosting some shows about I'm doing 10 a week now. And it's all different types of content, 5 different languages, like 5 different topics. And so I'm just basically using Blab as my platform for the business. You're asking me like how the business started. So basically it's an entire funnel where I go to different conferences, determine who I want to learn more about in terms of these startup founders, then bringing them on my shows. So for example, Sunday nights, I got Startup Mastermind. Monday, I got Where Nothing is Foreign. We talk about international relations, and I want Tayo on there again as well. Tuesdays, DC Tech. I just did it earlier tonight. Wednesday, Sharing Economy, and Thursday, Blab Lawyers, where we talk about legal tech issues. So as I'm going around these startup conferences, I identify companies that are in one of those verticals and basically say, you know what, I would like to have you as a guest so that I can learn more about your company. And then if they're doing something that's really interesting that I'm excited about and that I have quite a bit of knowledge in, then we go usually the next step where I'll try to engage with them as an advisor or take an equity stake in the company, et cetera. Because these are real early stage, pre-seed, bootstrapped companies that are really looking for somebody to partner up with. And I'm that guy.
Yeah. You know what's interesting about you, Ivan? So as I'm listening to your story, you hear wow from Carlos when you say you subscribe to over 100 podcasts. You hear wow again from him when you say 10 podcasts, 10 Blab shows a week. And, I've already gone through this process. And the immediate follow-up question to that is, how on earth do you do that? You crazy
you must
man.
not sleep.
So how on earth do you do that? What system do you do? How do you consume all that content? And how do you use that to channel your?
Well, I want to interject before you answer that. Also, Ivan, how do you earn a living while balancing 10 different podcasts?
Right. So like I said, I have a 40-hour-a-week job, which pays very well. I'm comfortable. That definitely provides for myself and my family. And that gives me a lot of runway to essentially start out my platform and grow the audience that then is slowly now starting to monetize. So that's basically the monetary aspect of it.
Okay. And the consumption strategies you have, I know.
Yeah, real quick on that note. So I consider myself a life hacker. You've heard of Tim Ferriss. He's got some good content. Carlos, we've already talked about this a little bit. And I look up to him in certain ways, but he's got good content out there. But I think I've scaled up from what he's actually produced because I've identified different things that are able to make your life more efficient. I mean, first thing foremost, you got to be physically healthy. I know, Tayo, you did a little Snapchat. I think it was a little video post on Facebook. You're all into exercising, right? So the key thing is you got to put your 8 hours of sleep in a day. You got to put in your exercise. That should be priority number 2 or tied with like a good diet. And then once you have that in place, you can totally dominate in everything else. And the way you dominate in everything else the rest of the day is you got to literally figure out and audit every single second that you're using throughout the day to determine if it's at its most efficient level based on current technologies. And also, since I always engage with these new tech companies, I'm always finding out something new that could potentially be used in my holistic lifestyle to make myself more efficient. So one thing I'll give you 3 hacks that I'm using big time. And you know about some of these. Voxer is the most efficient way to communicate with anybody right now on the planet. If I'm going to take you on as an advisory role, or if I'm going to invest in you as a company, you have to be on Voxer. That's how I'm going to communicate with you. If you don't want to get on Voxer, well, I'm sorry, I'm not your guy.
And tell us a little bit more about what is Voxer.
All right, so
for those folks that are listening right now that aren't familiar with the platform.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me pull out my phone and actually I'll show what it is. So my virtual assistant, which is just recently I hired a full-time virtual assistant this past week. The way I communicate with them is as such. I'll give you an example. So I pull up the app. I don't know if you can see it. It might be too, let's see here. It's Voxer right there in the middle. They just changed the app.
So we're looking at the iTunes store.
iPhone,
Voxer.
So you go on there, take Slack and 10x it in terms of efficiency. So most people are familiar with Slack. So with this platform, I don't have to text. I don't have to be like texting. Now I can if I want to. But here is how I task out my virtual assistant. I click on one button because I have a list of individuals or groups that I deal with. So the Piazza team, one of the startups I invest in. Another, like the Startup Mastermind group that I have. You can't see it. But it's a list of different groups or individuals. I click on my virtual assistant right there in the middle. And then I say, Hey, Mark, go ahead and create a lead magnet based on the 3 things that I'm about to discuss in this blab. Go ahead and go back at minute whatever, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes in, 20 minutes in, and listen to it, and then create a lead magnet of the 3 things I'm about to talk about. Thank you. There you go. I just tasked him out. He knows what's going on, and then he's going to execute on it at the end of this blab, right? Isn't that a little bit more efficient than actually texting? I think so. If you know,
it's almost like Siri, but sending that message to a real person.
Yes, audio. So you hear the inflection of the voice, you hear my sarcasm. You don't have to deal with the autocorrect and then going back and all this other stuff. It's just seamless, right? And it's like a walkie-talkie.
Gotcha,
so he could have listened to it live if his app was open. It would have just automatically played for him, or he can go back to it. And then the beauty of it too is that because I'm a life hacker, right? When I play somebody else's audio back, let me play something here. Sean Matthews, CEO of Swagbot, he sends me a message, and it's like a minute and a half long. I'm like, I don't have a minute and a half to listen to that. That's all right. So I play it at 4x. You can do 1x right here, 2x, 3x, 4x. So if they have a 4x option, I'm going to listen to it at 4x. If there was a 5x option, I'd listen to it at 5x, etc. So that's how you life hack that. Right. That's one.
So next one. What's
all
the
right,
next
2.
one?
You got to consume audio efficiently, right? We talked about the podcast. So podcasting, if you're using an iPhone, the app that I would recommend using right now is called Overcast. Tim Ferriss just found out about it a couple months ago. I've been using it for probably about 18 months or so. Basically, what I was trying to do is 18 months ago, I'm thinking to myself, you know what? Audio at 1x is too slow. There's programs out there at 2x, which is okay. But at the end of the day, a lot of podcasts that I listen to, like, for example, when we're talking right now and I breathe in, there's no content for that 1 second or that quarter second or the 2 seconds that I'm thinking. Well, why do you as a listener have to listen to that? You don't want to. You're wasting time by just listening to airspace. What Overcast does, which is what I wanted to create, but I found that company through trying to figure out if anybody else did it, is it deletes that air gap and compresses it as you're playing it. So not only are you able to listen to it at 2x, but you can do, what's the feature called? I'll try to think of I'll pull it up right now and tell you what that feature is on the platform.
Overcast.
Right. And it's called Smart Speed.
Basically, time is money, and you have no time to waste hearing others breathe. I love it.
Exactly. So Smart Speed allows you to compress it, and then 2, and then it can be up to 2.5 to 3x in its whole totality of you listen to a podcast. So if you're listening to an hour-long podcast at 3x, well, that's 20 minutes. I mean, that's a huge difference, right? So that's how I can consume. I subscribe to over 100 podcasts, right? So that's literally like listening to 25, 30 podcasts, right? Which is somewhat doable, right?
Gotcha.
But there's a new one, and you saw it when they're at the podcasting conference. There's an individual. I don't know. I think you were there. So an individual that was there.
Yeah, I was there.
Where is this? Where's my other phone?
I'm really curious to know, Ivan, how long with that app that you use, how long does it take for you to listen to an hour podcast if you're speeding up the audio?
So if I'm speeding up the audio, it depends. It'll be 2.5 to 3 times the normal speed. And if it's like a news broadcast, it'll be faster, because if it's a news broadcast about a topic that I don't like, I have it set up so that I auto forward 30 or 45 seconds. So then I'm just skipping right there. So usually if I'm listening to, I'm a news junkie. And one of the things I listen to is like NBC Nightly News, ABC, like all the major news programs. And even though it's 30 minutes, if you watch it live, well, delete the commercials. That brings it down to 20 to 21 minutes. And then 3x it, that brings it down to 7 minutes. And then if you're skipping a story or two, it ends up being about a 4 to 5 minute broadcast, right? So literally 5 minutes, you're crushing a 30-minute show.
Now, does it affect the pitch of the voice?
Well, let's listen.
AKA Wu-Tang Bunny just jumped in the room. So my hustler that I want spotlight for this week is none other than the man.
So that's normal speed, and here's the fastest speed with Smart Speed.
Also, which is a sales guy. He's a world-renowned sales trader, and this guy's always bringing the energy, always bringing the fire, bringing the hustle to sales. I want to get him here on the show. I don't want to make that happen, but he reached out to me.
You can actually process what I am saying at
that's
3x
speed. At 3x, and it's too slow for me, and that's why I ended up getting. Well, yeah, that's why I ended up getting the Note 5, because it's an Android device, the fastest one currently, which is this one right here. And there's a podcasting app called what is it? Podcast. It's not Podcast Maniac. It's something along those lines, though. Let me pull it up right now. It is called. Yeah, here we go. Podcast Addict. And that app is the first app that allows you, without loss of audio, to listen up to 5x. Now, I haven't worked myself up to 5x yet, so I'm amateur hour in that regard. I'm up to 4. And that definitely crushes the audio content consumption, which allows me to have quite a bit of stuff in my head to be able to then produce valuable content.
So, no, I mean, it sounds like anything is. People said the 4-minute mile wasn't possible before. 3x to us sounded very, very fast, but you worked your way up. So you work your way up and you build your tolerance towards that, and then you consume podcasts that way. So what about the third one? Exactly. Boom. So you got Voxer, you got Overcast, and now what's the third one?
All right, so the third one,
Third Life app.
I would say is, magazines and books are still a good tool to consume information. And granted, we talked about, right? There's still quite a bit of value to be had. You have 0 to 1 written by Peter Thiel, a lot of content and a lot of value. You have a lot of these, right? Startup books, entrepreneurship, Gary Vee's books. So what I end up using for that is Overdrive. I'm sure. Have you guys heard of that?
Mm-hmm. I have not. Tell our listeners what is Overdrive.
All right, so this is kind of like a double, triple hack on this one I'm going to talk about. So Overdrive, here you go. I'm giving you everything, all the goods, baby, because I love you guys. So, secrets. But I got other ones. So Overdrive is an app on the iPhone and on the Android. It goes by the name Overdrive. It's got a big O. I think I can pull that up as well. And what that app does is allows you to pull down books from your local library. So imagine instead of going to your library, you can check out books electronically. That one saves time traveling to pick up the book and dropping it off afterwards. So you can download it anywhere you are on the planet. So the big thing here is you're consuming content and you're consuming it for free because your taxpayer dollars are paying for that digital content by paying for the existence of that library, and the library creates that relationship with the distributor or publisher to purchase the digital rights for those. So it's a legal way to consume free content, free books. So what you end up doing is you do it like me, and again, you 11x it because 10x is a little too slow for me. That's kind of idling. Because Grant Cardone does 10x, so I got to one-up him, right? And so at 11x at least, you got to incorporate at least 11 libraries into your library profile in Overdrive. So I have New York Public, which is the largest public library in the world where you can actually check out books. Brooklyn, Queens Public Library, and then all the DC area counties. DC Public, Arlington, Alexandria, Falls Church, Montgomery County, etc. And then the Southern Maryland, all the ones that I'm eligible to get access to based on my living in Northern Virginia. I'm a member and have a library card of all those counties. And the reason why I do is because every county has a different pool or a body of books that they purchase, right? Well, so then you incorporate all those, and then on top of that, you end up using the iPhone feature, which is called VoiceOver. Max out the speed that VoiceOver reads the text that you have in your book. It ends up being probably closer to 4x based on, they don't even say what it is, but I got a sense that based on all my listening of different audio at high speeds, it's 4x. And so I literally can consume a 15-page book, which is like an average size of a book, of a newer book, in about 2.5 hours. So 2.5 hours comes down to, for most people, commute to work, back from work, and then your workout. There you have it. You can literally consume one book a day. And after 2 weeks, you're literally a subject matter expert in anything you want to be a subject matter expert in.
Awesome. Well, those are really helpful. 3 hustle hacks. We really appreciate it, Ivan. So moving on, you had mentioned you're pretty new to the game, right? You're going to all these different podcast conferences. You're getting involved in the whole social media scene. Tell us, who are some of the folks that you've met so far that have, for lack of a better term, really swept you off your feet? Who's impressed you, who you feel is doing really big things and going to really far places?
Pause.
Not a lot of people impress you.
That sounds cocky. I would say the ones that are doing really well in my book that I consume all of their content pretty much are Mark Andreessen with his with what he's doing with A16Z, that podcast, Andreessen Horowitz. It gives you a really big picture, big level of what's going on in the venture capital world. And if you want to follow him on Twitter, it's PMarca, at PMARCA. He's definitely one to, I mean, he pretty much knows the whole show on venture capital in Silicon Valley. Another person that I would say, and we already mentioned him, was Gary Vaynerchuk, Tim Ferriss. They're doing great work. And I have actually, within Overcast, I have what's called a category called near peers. Right?
Okay.
I'll click on there.
Right.
And my near peers list is the Ask Gary V show, A16Z, Pat Flynn with his Ask Pat podcast, Jason Calacanis, who I hung out pretty much all last week. It was This Week in Startups. He's a big angel investor, literally a super angel investor in a startup incubator / advisor out West Coast. Tim Ferriss we mentioned. And then I really like what Chris Ducker's doing. I met him last night up in Philly. I'm part of his mastermind group, Upreneur. And to be honest, it's the energy that these guys bring. And a couple other ones that are on my radar now are you two guys.
All right.
Carlos Gill and Tayo Roxon. And a third one that caught my eye was Anthony Manaya. Young kid, but yeah, he's got huge potential. I really like.
We had him on. As a second guest of the show. He
needs a little. He's going to round out a little bit, and that kid's going to blow up.
I was going to say, which if you subscribe on iTunes to the Hustle Culture Podcast,
boom, perfect time.
Then you can go ahead and listen to Anthony on episode number 2. So I had to go ahead and get that plug in there. So, Ivan, moving on here, I'm going to summarize your LinkedIn profile because I'm looking at it right now. You have on here that you're a collaborative economy entrepreneur, angel investor, startup advisor. You have a law degree. You're a former Green Beret, blabber, and podcast maniac, which you alluded to before. But, talk to us and talk to the listeners out there about going through the climb, right? What obstacles have you had to overcome throughout your life and your career to get to where you're at today?
Going through the climb. Well, I'll start off. My parents are immigrants from the former Soviet Union. And, growing up, I spoke Russian. So you had the bicultural aspect. So I was a little bit out of place everywhere I went. As far as that's kind of like contextually my personal background. As far as going through the climb in the business sense, or is that what you're kind of referring to?
Yeah, business and personal.
Personal.
Everyone that has come on the show so far, they have a very interesting backstory. And I think that's attributed to, there is no overnight success. I think we say that on every single episode. And there's always a backstory behind the hustler. So we really want to know, what is your backstory? I know from you and I meeting each other, you talked to me about your background in the military. And you're doing some really cool things now. You've got that legal degree. So where exactly did your humble beginnings start?
They're still humble. What are you talking about? So the humble beginnings started with, I don't know. I would say that a real pivotal moment in my life was I was 18 years old, or 17 actually, and I got the opportunity to travel to Russia for the first time, or overseas for the first time. And there I saw, this was the mid 90s in St. Petersburg, Russia. And we go from abundance in the United States over there. It was like literally gangland over there. People are starving just, immediately after the Soviet Union collapses. And I saw how much opportunity we have here in the States. And over there, literally people are just basically trying to hustle to get a loaf of bread to put on the table. And then you have alcoholics on the street pretty much dying off. And so I saw that and I thought, you know what? I'm totally underutilizing the opportunity that I have when I, back in the States, because I was pretty much a C student in high school, and I didn't really focus on getting good grades and focusing on school. But that really switched my mindset. And then when I came back to the States, I started really studying hard, getting good grades, and then just trying to basically be, it sounds corny, but like a role model essentially, right? In terms of being able to execute in a way that other people can look at and say, you know what, that's commendable, or not look up to, but like appreciate. So that's really probably the trigger point. that I can think of. And then since then, went to college, did the law degree, and then after that did the military thing, went for the most selective opportunities available, into special forces, and then other things after that.
This is so interesting.
And then,
you know why? It's very interesting you got this diverse background, but I want you to tell me through your vantage point, through all these careers you've had, what do you think is the biggest problem that budding entrepreneurs face? And what do you think they can do to get through that? And my opinion, I think there's a mindset wall that people have, and they feel like they can't get there. But I know you have a philosophy of going deep and going wide. And you and I have talked about that for a little bit, but maybe you can elaborate on that to Carlos and the rest of the audience, because I think it's really interesting. It's very ambitious, but I think it's really interesting what you think about it.
Yeah, you basically hit 2 points there. So the first thing is what a budding entrepreneur usually stumbles upon, or what the issues are with the budding entrepreneur. I think the biggest thing is apprehension for success. A lot of times people have confidence and the education to be able to do something. Actually, they have the education to do it and the drive to do it, but they lack the confidence to do it. Instead of just jumping in. For example, what did I do with my blabs? And they're still horrible, right? So I go in there and all I do is just, you know what? This is my platform. This is going to be my baby, and I'm just going to execute. I have no clue how to upload to YouTube. I have no clue how to do iTunes. I mean, that's all going to work itself out. Just start producing, push yourself to be able to then go to the next level. Because if you don't start, you're like, a lot of people are starting to plan. You know what? Oh, I still haven't come up with my strategic plan, how I'm going to monetize this and that. Just go. I mean, things are going to fall into place. And the more you do it, the more feedback that you have by doing it this way, the faster you're going to become successful. I mean, great example, like John Lee Dumas. I'm sure all of us podcasters know him. You just jump in. Now, his quote is "fake it till you make it," right?
Yeah.
Well, literally, to be honest, I could say I was faking it from February when I started studying until, to be honest, I think my tipping point was this last couple of weeks going to San Francisco, because I feel like I can engage with anybody at this point, right?
Pause. You just started getting on social media in February, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
A little later, but I started studying about it in February. I mean, I had accounts, but I really started engaging probably about 2-3 months ago.
That's ridiculous, because now you're everywhere. And then,
okay. and then the real MBA comes, right, when you come out here to the Bay Area and you're in Silicon Valley and you're networking and bouncing from event to event and startup like you have over the last couple of weeks. All
right, let me answer the MBA question, then we'll go to wide and deep real quick, Ty. So MBA, I talk to people how, like, why do you want to spend $100,000, $200,000 on an MBA when you have it right here in your phone? You can access an MBA literally from right here. How did I do it? Doing it at 3X, whatever. Listening to literally every single episode of John Lee Dumas's show and curating that will give you sufficient information on what you need in order to be able to be a successful entrepreneur. Because he interviews, he's interviewed almost 1,100 entrepreneurs. And so why not just take that and figure out which 1, 2, 3, or 10 are kind of in the space that you're passionate about and model after them and just start executing, because that's the way to do it. I mean, watch other people that have done it, that have been successful, and just take it and run with it, and then do better than what they're doing. So wide and deep. So I'm glad you're asking the question now, because I think the context has been set to, I think, hopefully convince people that it's doable. Gary Vee talks about he wants to be deep with his community. He doesn't think, most people are trying to be wide by getting a whole slew of followers, right? I mean, I see here we got 13 people. Other than us, that's 10. That's huge. I mean, that's 10 people. But most people will look at that as like, oh, whatever. But the people that are in here are much more engaging. They're leaders because they're not afraid to be behind the scenes of the text, right? So wide and deep. The way to be deep is to you yourself study, and know subjects very, like, much deeper than the preponderance of your listeners. I feel comfortable in saying, based on all my life hacks, that in each one of my episodes, I know more about the subject than the preponderance of my listeners, because I put in the time. I put in efficient use of time to know the subject matter, right? And then as far as, that's the depth piece. And as far as wide, I go to conferences, I engage face-to-face. This platform right here allows you to more efficiently engage with larger amounts of people Whereas before you had to go to a conference, 30 minutes, 4-hour flight, 5-hour flight, plus a taxi cab ride, and you're not engaging with anybody. Today's technology like this, Blab, allows you to go deep and wide. And think of I don't know if I was talking to you about this, Carlos, but if you're taking an Uber, if you need to get somewhere and you're not using Uber Pool, you just miss an opportunity to engage with somebody at depth that's riding with you for 10, 15 minutes. That's probably somebody that you can help and vice versa, and then help grow your business. So every time I'm in a city that has Uber Pool or Lyft line, that's the only way I'm going to do it.
Well, I told you how I landed my job at LinkedIn, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Uber Pool is where it's at. I call it leave no stone unturned.
Because you got to get there, right?
It's a mantra that I have practiced for years, as long as I can remember now. If someone wants to meet up with you for coffee, meet that person for coffee. If they want to meet with you for lunch, if they want 5 minutes of your time, meet up with them, because you never know when someone on the other side of that door might hold the keys to your success. And again, to your point with Uber Pool, why the hell not? It's cheaper, and you're going to have an opportunity to sit in a car and talk with someone that might be super connected. Right. And that actually is a great lead into the story of not missing an opportunity to meet somebody in the parking lot of Mid-Atlantic Podcast Conference. So there you have it. Here, let me put some props up, because I thought that we might be talking about this. Remember this? Yeah.
For those of you that don't know the story, if you can catch the last episode, the one with Matt Chambers, he basically cornered me at a podcast and conference, and we did a podcast interview with those two iPhones that you see on there. And on iTunes, if you're listening, he told me, when am I going to be coming on your show? And he basically convinced me that he was a great guest. And then from then on, we started recording the podcast, and we did it in the backseat of his car. But that was straight hustling. But staying on this point here, I wanted you talked about taking advantage of your community, using Pool, and hustling the conferences and taking advantage of those conferences. Can you elaborate on the conference point, and then give maybe 2 more points to first-time entrepreneurs as to what they need to do initially to build these relationships?
All right, biggest thing is, so here's what I do at conferences in preparation for them. Identify the conferences of where you think you want to, figure out what community you want to be a part of, but you got to make sure you figure out first what you're passionate about, and that business needs to be it needs to overlap with what you're passionate about. Once you figure out what you're passionate about, figure out what other people that are out there on the internet through social media are also passionate about the same subject, and then go after the big names that already established themselves, and then try to figure out, how to bring them value. So jump onto the Twitter, jump onto Facebook, whatever that person's using, start jumping on and bringing them value. And then once you get to the conference point, try to figure out who those people at the conference you want to meet. Now, if there's a bunch of speakers, keynotes, and attendees that are going to be there that you want to meet, prioritize it. Go down the list of who you want to engage first, second, third. Just go down the list, and then make that list, and then determine, what you have in common with that individual, and then also what you can, that could potentially benefit that person that they may not know about, and you're gonna get on their radar immediately once you jump in and say, hey, my name is Ivan Raiklin, like Grant Cardone. He was on the top of my list when I went to Periscope Summit. Granted, he's a busy man. You got to differentiate yourself. So my first thing that I said to him was like, hey, Grant, we talked on Blab one time. You don't remember me because you talk to a lot of people. However, you're going to be seeing a lot of me. Good to meet you. And then I rolled out, right? He's like, well, who the hell is this guy? You got to differentiate yourself depending on the level of the individual that you're talking with. And then other folks, right? So study the individuals you want to engage with, figure out how to bring them value, and then the rest will follow. That's how I was able to get into VIP pass tickets with Jason Calacanis based on a 10-second conversation that I had with him.
Well, so you just went up to him and said,
I was going to say, I think you might have shared when we were together here in San Francisco, you might have shared your methodology, Ivan. So why don't you divulge it to all these hustlers out here that want to know how to work an event? So who you should go to and what you should say upon your arrival.
It's going to be specific to the individual that you're trying to develop a relationship with. But let's see here. One thing that I would say is if there's an event with a lot of people and you want to engage with somebody, don't be afraid. It's like everybody else is going to be afraid. There's only going to be, out of the 1,000 people that are at the conference, maybe say 50 people are going to be bold enough to go up after that A-lister. So of those 50, you literally just weeded out 950 people. So go up there and engage with them. But the thing is, you got to, you're trying to create a relationship. Just like Gary Vee's told this many times in his keynotes, right? The first time you engage with someone, just like on a date, you just don't go, you don't go after the end state. It's a process. But at the same time, you can expedite that process by looking, doing some self-reflection, figuring out what you bring to the table. So say I have a military background. I have things that, I know about and may have access to provide tours or whatever that most people don't, and especially in the startup scene. So I have a little differentiator there. So you can offer something that may be something special to them that they normally don't get pitched or offered that could be considered valuable to them. So that's essentially what I did. And that was out of my respect towards him, Jason, because I've consumed so much of his content, learned so much from him. And it's literally just my way of saying, hey, man, I appreciate what you've been doing. Here's my way of giving back what I can give, because at the end of the day, his net worth is immensely more than mine. So there's nothing I could do other than maybe a gesture that he would consider as something valuable that he would normally not have an opportunity to engage with.
You see, I'm gonna share with all of you hustlers out there, my tips. While I come across as very much extroverted on platforms like Blab and on social media, I am very much an introvert. I'm an only child. And I'm honestly a very shy person. So I will never walk into a room. I'll never be the guy that just walks into a conference and just starts shaking hands and introducing myself to people. Typically, I'll be in the back of the room. I'll be to the side, and I'll observe very much. But what's really worked for me, and I'd love to know, Ivan and Tyle, from you guys, a little bit more. But what's really worked for me is before an event, I will go online and see who's going to be speaking there. And I will try to engage through social media with one or two of the speakers beforehand. And what's great is with Twitter, you can go on, you can run a search and see who's talking about the event. So if you can see if there's someone that's perhaps not speaking but attending, you can start engaging in dialogue with them ahead of time. Yeah, absolutely. Fist bumps right back at you. And that's perfect because now it gets you on their radar. And you can start building this dialogue. So by the time you get there, it's like, hey, Ivan, hey, Tyler, like, what's up? Great to meet you. Like, you've already made a friend by the time you get
Tyler at the conference.
The other thing, and again, like, you got to use social media to your advantage. Like, I was at a conference, what was it, 2 or 3 weeks ago? It was a brand conference. And this really high-profile executive for Visa, Shiv Singh, was speaking there. Well, I've followed Shiv since he was at PepsiCo. And as soon as he was done speaking, I walked right up to him. And I was like, hey, Shiv, I've been, following you since your days at PepsiCo. I love the work that you did there. And I love what you're doing at Visa. And like, boom, it was like right away, I broke the ice because I was able to make that connection. And it showed him that I did a little bit of due diligence on him. And I think like that's what I'm trying to get at is like when you approach people, know exactly, have a strategy around who they are and what you're going to say to them. Don't just walk up and be like, hey, I follow you on Twitter, or, hey, that was a great speech, and not really be able to follow it up with, your close or your jab, if you will.
Right. Absolutely. Go ahead, Tim.
No, that's correct. That's correct. And one of the conferences that I've been to that changed my complete outlook was one. I went to a millennial conference, as you all know. I am the youngest here, but it was full of millennial entrepreneurs and put on by millennials. And one of the interesting things was, before the conference happened, I made a list of, I saw a list of the other speakers, and I started interacting with them because I was one of the speakers there as well. And we started like, hey, I see that you do this, love that you do that. We should meet up over there. We should grab lunch. And then we started building this relationship. By the time we got there, it was like, whoa, I was just talking to you the other day. And it made the conversation so much easier. And we were able to actually vibe more and engage more with the audience. But that was the first time I'd ever tried that before, because before I went to conferences, I was sort of enamored by, I got to reach that speaker. And I wasn't focused on building that engagement. That's the great thing that you did, Ivan, at the conference, because you were like, this conference is going to be recorded. I'll catch it, but I want to build relationships with people here. And that's what you told me. And that's always stuck with me. And I've never really looked
Yes,
at a conference from
absolutely.
that point
So
of view
if there's a
before, so
conference where
it's
literally it's just going to be one speaker talking to the crowd, it's not going to be engaging sort of discussion, and it's going to be recorded, why are you going to sit through that when you can listen to it like me at 2 or 3x and use the opportunity instead of sitting amongst the crowd, engaging with the vendors, creating that network? I mean, that's what I did at Podcast Movement. Who did I meet at Podcast Movement during the time that everybody else was in there listening to a speaker? I met the PodClear team, which was just the entire team. Spencer, Hannah, and Josh, who were just acquired by Blab, and I just was able to hang out with them out there. And just like those little micro relationships is where you're able to really snowball on what you're trying to do with your own business, because you start to know everybody instead of just sitting there as a lemming amongst the masses.
Love it. Gotcha. Now, okay, so you're an angel investor. What type of businesses, if anyone is listening right now, are you looking to invest in? I know it's very early stage stuff, but which type of businesses are you looking to get involved in? And I know you described your combination as a Gary Vaynerchuk meets Tim Ferriss meets someone else. So I know you're like this multi-faceted individual. So I want to give the audience a picture of who they might be looking to when they, potentially get an investment for you.
Yeah, sure. So the two main spaces that I am interested in, that I'm most passionate about, is the collaborative economy, which Jeremiah Ouyang talks about. He was just on Joel Comm's show a little earlier today. And what that really is the sharing economy, shared economy. I mean, your Ubers, your Airbnbs. But I'm talking about now companies that are brand new at pre-seed, that are bootstrapping, that are literally come up with a crazy idea that's, most people are like, oh my God, that's never going to work. But in that space, and then also within legal tech, because legal tech is usually the last one. The legal community is usually the last one because they're extremely apprehensive to move in the direction of adopting technology. So those two are the ones that I'm most interested in. And one of the ones, so a company that I met at Launch Mobile last week, it's an Uber for personal training. Now I already have a company in my portfolio that I advise that's in that space in Chicago, but these guys are in LA. So we started talking, and there's a potential for further engagement and involvement of maybe aligning those two interests together. It's still premature, but like companies like that are literally brand new. That's more of a later stage company, but I think they saw that I had identified already in the sharing economy companies that are similar to what they're doing in Baltimore, in New York, in DC, in Chicago, that they could potentially partner up with. Because at the end of the day, everybody's doing these things simultaneously, and there's not enough room to have 2-3 players in the market. If they can all form together under one brand, then if you want a personal trainer in Chicago or LA under the same brand, it's going to be easy for you. And that's where I was kind of like working with. And then as far as the legal tech, Thursday? Oh, tomorrow night on my show, Sharing Economy, I'm going to have, I think I got to finalize the details, CEO of a company that essentially it's in the sharing economy. And what she does is allows people to use underutilized kitchen space. Now, I don't think there's much money to be made off of it, but it's still an interesting play. So say, for example, you have a restaurant that closes down at 10 o'clock, and you have somebody that wants to cater a huge event and wants to use that kitchen because it's the closest kitchen available to cater an event that they don't have access to. There may be an interesting play where you can use that kitchen for whatever 2, 3, 6 hours that's not being used. It brings money to the restaurant, and then it also is cheaper than actually, I don't know, renting. I don't even know how much something like that would cost to rent. So that's an interesting play. And then Thursday, another company that I met at Launch Scale was, it's an Uber for attorneys. Now, there are a couple other ones that I've already met, but this one has a little bit of interesting twist to it. So if you want to tune in, be my guest.
For sure.
Did I answer the question? I think I did.
You did. Because you gave us the, I wanted to know what types of companies you were interested in. You told us about the sharing economy, which I know is something you're very passionate about, right? And you told us about that, and you also discussed kind of some of the companies you're already involved in. So that's amazing. I didn't know as much about the sharing economy until I started talking to you. So
Everyone
I
out
gotta
there,
give shout outs to both of you before you say anything, Carlos. Tayo and Carlos, you thought that remember you said I copied and pasted 100 different people with the same request to vote for Piazza. It was actually only about 3 or 4, I think it was. I don't remember. It wasn't 100. So I did copy and paste real quick, but then I followed up with a separate text message, which
you also copy and pasted, but it's all good. Gotta love the hustle, man.
But wait, where are you at? Right there and right there.
Look, look.
You guys.
Hey,
I
look,
wasn't
I'm
not
not going to knock the hustle, man.
People's Choice Award, bro.
Hey, look, in my day, bro, I'm giving you fist bumps right back. In my day, I emailed, spam, text, you name it. Everyone you can imagine. Hey, real talk. Just today, I invited all of my Facebook friends, all 5,000 of them, to like our Hustle Culture Facebook page. So right now, I'm sure there's someone out there that's probably saying, wow, this Carlos Gill is really a spammer. I'm going to unfriend him. So no worries.
But if you don't ask, right?
Well, speaking of that, I just want to thank everyone that's coming on right now, because I know, especially on the East Coast, it's late. But I also want to thank you for enjoying and listening to Ivan, because Ivan's the man. You've seen a lot of comments on the side where like, that's effing smart, Ivan. Thank you for that app. And they really appreciate it. So I want to thank you all for the engagement. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, we're gonna keep jamming. We got about
really
15 minutes left here on today's show. So, thanks to everyone that's watching us on Blab and listening to us on iTunes, the Hustle Culture Podcast. And for those of you watching us here on Blab, make sure that you subscribe, listen, and leave us a review. So moving on, Ivan, you've mentioned a lot. You've done a lot of name dropping on this episode, Gary V.
Hey, you got to.
Harris. I'm going to ask you this question. Let's name 3 people that you get your drive from that you haven't yet mentioned on the Hustle Culture Podcast.
Yeah. Oh, so wife and kids. I mean, that's what else can I say? I got 2 little boys. I got a 3-year-old, 5-year-old, and my wife. They're definitely, I do my hustle, obviously, for making sure that they're taken care of. And you're going to start seeing my older son traveling with me, because I got to make sure I mentor him properly on being able to engage with other people and see what the rest of the world's about. Because entrepreneurship it's OJT, right? It's on the job. You can't really learn it quicker than actually doing it versus just going to school. I know that's a boring answer, but that's my answer.
Right. No, it's not. You're the second person to say that. Last guest we had, Matt Chambers, talked about his fiance. All right,
wife and kids, we'll count that as one. We'll just say family.
What?
Yeah, man. Yeah, hey, so 2 more people that drive you the most and just push you. And it could be anyone that inspires you.
All right, so it'll be a general person. Basically, anybody that's dominating in their space drives me, because I basically want to push them to be better so that I have another person to compete with, right? Mm-hmm. So if they're continuing to push me, then we keep rising above the rest. So if I can find folks like you guys, Tayo and Carlos, and some other folks that I already name dropped, if I can push them to be better than what they currently are, those are the type of people that drive me. And then they drive me. Grant Cardone, right. 10X. Right. I got to go 11, baby.
Yeah. So one thing I've learned from you, I mean, I already knew that, is you consume a lot of content, and you do that because you want to learn. And that's basically your way, School of Hard Knocks. You are very competitive. So if someone says, I can read 3X, or I can listen to podcast 4X, you go, nah, next level. That's the type of thing you're doing. So you're always driving yourself. And I find that that's a good trait for a hustler, like the inner drive to always be better than mediocre, but not even just better than mediocre, to improve on your personal best. And I think that's something that you personify. So I think it's a great reminder that, there's always one level.
Now, don't get me wrong.
No matter where
I want to find people that are doing better than me, because then, like I said, it's going to push me.
So you can be better than them.
Well, not that sense, but like it pushes you, right? Just like competition.
Yeah, I agree for sure. And okay, so before we're getting towards the wrapping up stage here, one of the questions that we all do, this is something that you and I both share. We're both passionate about culture and language and learning. Moi, je parle français. Toi, I don't know how to say. I don't know how to say anything in Russian, but you speak Russian, you speak Spanish, you speak English, you speak a lot of these things. I want you to tell the audience why you're so passionate about language and culture in general, and why you feel like that helps round the person as a whole. For me, French has helped me think differently, helped me make more friends. But you speak 5, so I can't.
You know how it is. I also, and same thing with Carlos. I mean, come on, Cubano, pues. I mean, man, we gotta talk about the Cuba thing before we finish this up, too.
Absolutely, let's do it, man.
So, as far as culture, here's my thing. The thing is, like, you're able to anybody is able to connect with somebody else because we can speak the same language. Right now, we're all speaking in English, and some of the words that I'm dropping, names that I'm dropping are some names and things that you can reference to, which automatically creates like rapport. I mean, that we created instant rapport essentially when I met with Carlos, when I met with you, Ty, right? Well, you can't do that if somebody doesn't understand English. You gotta either they have to learn English or you have to flip it and learn their language. So it doesn't have to be another foreign language. I mean, say for example, you're talking to somebody from an urban environment, you have to use different terminology for them to feel comfortable opening up to you, right? Because then they see, oh, this guy knows a little bit about my subculture or my culture. When I start throwing out some words in, my Latino words or in Espanol, it's like, oh man, this white boy knows a little bit of Spanish, So, but to wrap everything up is the fact that if you can communicate with someone where they feel comfortable talking to you, you establish rapport, and then you start establishing trust after a few, after you're developing that relationship. And after you develop that relationship, then you can open up and do business. And that's the whole life cycle. And so if you want to do well on the global stage, I think you have to really factor in culture and language. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a window into the soul of someone else.
So Cuba.
Exactly.
Yeah, let's talk about Cuba. We got about 9 more minutes left in the show. So
nice.
All you listeners out there, I am of Cuban heritage, as Ivan knows. We got into this conversation over the last couple of weeks. He is fluent in Spanish. And for those of you listening on iTunes, you can't see him right now, but those of you on Blab, imagine Ivan putting on a pair of Ray-Bans and a black suit, and you've got Mr. 305, Pitbull. There we go.
This guy.
Fluent in Spanish.
Órale, mano.
And he has a really cool vision for, take it away, uniting, what was it? Uniting borders through the internet?
Yeah, basically that's it. So I'm all in on live streaming. You guys are all in on live streaming, especially, Tayo, Carlos, and everybody that's listening in on Blab. So the way I see it is after my conference at Periscope Summit, after visiting the Blab headquarters, I think we're ripe for time to do a live streaming conference in Havana, Cuba, where the theme is how live streaming and social media breaks down national borders. Because right now, the reason why I choose Cuba is because the United States just opened up diplomatic relations with Cuba. So now I know it's early in the process, and there's probably still visa requirements and all these things that have to still play out. But literally in the last week, talking to Carlos, talking to a lot of folks in the Periscope community, the Blab community, and I was kind of polling folks to see the level of interest. And I think there's sufficient level of interest for me to start moving forward in identifying, the hurdles and what needs to be done for setting up a conference sometime next year in Havana, where potentially we can get some big name sponsors to create the infrastructure necessary to be able to live stream and show how, Cuba is now opening itself up to, it's been open to a lot of the world, but not North America and, the Western world. So that'll give an opportunity for like T-Mobile. John Legier is a big live streamer to potentially create some towers that, 4G LTE towers. It'll only require a few, right? And then have Airbnb potentially host the event in terms of having people stay at Airbnb suites, and then maybe Uber providing the transportation in and around Havana. And then, so that brings value and benefit to those companies. But on the flip side, it brings value to Cuba because it'll be one of the first ways for people to see how they can integrate themselves into social media, into the global economy from Cuba, because currently they don't have that good of an internet connection. And if you want to be successful in today's world, you have to have a decent internet connection. And I think that conference will definitely be the conference to start developing that infrastructure. I don't know. What are your thoughts? Actually, let me ask the folks that are in here. What do you guys think? Garbage or okay?
Yeah, what do you guys think on the side? On the side? I mean, look, I think why not? That's what I'm thinking. So the live streaming, I think, is just at the beginning of whatever it could potentially be. So whether it's to help
I
bridge
think
borders or
that might be the beginning of the movement where the world, especially the streamers, probably start to look to elect, who knows, a president of the internets. Because think about it, if you are removing borders or you're bridging borders through the internet, through live stream, think about it. Possibilities are endless. Who governs that?
ICANN, right? Was it? Yeah, ICANN.
Well,
is the one that controls the internet.
That's some next level thinking right there.
But to sort of bring it back
let's
here,
bring it back
since
into
we're
reality.
I'm that guy. I'm the reality guy. So if we are, since we're closing here and we wanted to continue this dialogue, talk about a way to connect through internet across borders, where can we find you, Ivan? And then where can we reach out to see what you're up to and plug your shows?
Boom. Okay, so
shows.
my branded.me website is just again, I just hired my full-time guy, so he's going to start working on all these things. But IvanRaiklin.com, you can find me, and Twitter if you want to engage with me. Twitter, DM me if you want. If you have any questions or you need any help with something that I might be able to help out with. Let's see. My shows Sunday nights at 9. Startup Mastermind. This is Eastern Standard Time, PM. Monday nights Where Nothing Is Foreign, 9 p.m. Tuesday, DC Tech, 9 p.m. Wednesday, Sharing Economy. Thursday, Blab Lawyers. And Saturday, I'm changing it up, but I'm going to have my 5 shows on Saturdays. I'm going to cut them short to like half hour because there's not that much engagement when it comes to international stuff. So right. It's right. Chinese language, culture, cuisine, music, basically talk about, Asia. And then we do it Arabic, French, Spanish, and Russian. Not in that order, but basically that's what I do on Saturdays. It's kind of an eclectic mix so that I can identify. I mean, at the end of the day, we're doing it for networking and business purposes. So it's literally once you create a title on a Blab, that literally starts to attract your funnel. I mean, your business funnel. So like people are interested in that subject naturally. They go in there, determine if Ivan Raiklin or Tayo Roxon or Carlos Gil is somebody that they think it brings them value. And then if they feel that, then you basically say, hey, subscribe on iTunes. Mm-hmm. Go ahead and submit the following text to 33444, like the Sharing Economy newsletter that I do. Sharing Economy.
And it gives you a piece of content to share out, right. which is important, right? So to your point, Blab is great because before you even launch your event, you can be promoting on social media, you can be talking about it. So, on that note, before we wrap up, Ivan, our last segment here on the Hustle Culture podcast is where we give our guests an opportunity to pitch themselves, right? So you just talked about the events that you host, right, which is where we can find you, but this is more of think Shark Tank, right? So I'm Mark Cuban and Tayo is gosh, I always forget his name. The guy from Fubu.
Yeah.
Oh, so I'm going to be the black guy.
Wait, David John.
Be the black guy.
So, Ivan, you got 30 seconds.
I wish I could be Chris Saka. That's a name I didn't drop yet. Chris Saka, Super Angel.
You just name dropped another celeb in the VC community. So, anyways, you got 30 seconds, Ivan. Go.
This one's easy. I don't need 30 seconds. So, hey, my name is Ivan Raiklin. I'm going to teach you how to be a subject matter expert in any subject for free in 30 days.
Bam. That's it. Bam. Hashtag real talk.
Okay. Well, then, sign me up, first of all. And that's
basically
Ivan Raiklin.
Those 3 hacks that I showed you. That was the 3 hacks that I told you about. We'll literally do that for you.
Right. Gotcha. No, I already started getting those apps, and we're definitely going to put that in the show notes, which you can get at where,
You can
Carlos?
get it on iTunes. We're also on Facebook, on Twitter, and Stitcher and Libsyn.
Stitcher.
So thank you so much for listening, guys.
Your microphone's awesome now. You sound like a radio voice, Carlos. I love it.
Take us home, Tayo. Thank you, Ivan.
Yeah, no. Thank you, Ivan, for coming on. Thank you, Carlos, for being my amazing co-host as usual.
I love you guys.
And as I always say, use your difference to make a difference.
Fist bumps.
Boom.
Peace out, hustlers.